Australian-born conductor Heather Buchanan is professor of music and director of choral activities at Montclair State University in New Jersey, where she conducts choirs ranging in size from 175 down to 24. Choirs under her direction have won critical acclaim for their heartfelt conviction, vibrant sound, grace and precision, and for singing with the crispness and dexterity of a professional choir. During her tenure at Montclair State University, choirs have collaborated with a variety of renowned national and international performing artists and composers, including Meredith Monk, the Richard Alston Dance Company, Chen Yi, Tarek O'Regan, members of the Vienna Philharmonic, and conductors Nime Yardi, Jacques Lecombe, Zhen Shang, George Monahan, Patrick Dupré-Quigley, Roderick Cox, John Mauceri, Jeffrey Schindler, and Susie Ben-Shazil-Sider with the New Jersey Symphony Orchestra. Apologies. Her choral orchestral collaborations with the New Jersey Symphony Orchestra have included Beethoven's Ninth Symphony, Mozart's Requiem, Verdi's Requiem, Orff's Carmina Burana, Mahler's Symphony No. 3, Mendelssohn Midsummer Night's Dream, Zelda, Symphony of the Goddess, Harry Potter and the Prisoner of Azkaban, and Howard Shore's Academy Award-winning The Lord of the Rings Symphony. Her choirs have sung on commercially produced recordings with Meredith Monk and the New Jersey Symphony Orchestra. The Montclair State University Singers CD, I Sing Because, was released in March 2020 with 50 members of the choir, and 50 members of the choir will perform Mahler's epic Symphony No. 8 with the Melbourne Symphony Orchestra in Australia under the baton of Sir Colin Davis. Supposed to be in October 2020. I'm going to assume it's been postponed and it will be happening at a later date. I'm going to move ahead. Dr. Buchanan holds degrees from the Queensland Conservatorium of Music, Griffith University in Australia, the Westminster Choir College of Rider University, and the University of New England in Australia. She specializes in teaching of body mapping, a neuroanatomical approach for enhancing music technique, and has been a licensed body mapping educator since 2002. In June 2017, she was awarded the Barbara Conable Teaching Award in recognition of exemplary teaching, innovative ideas, dynamic performer, and passionate musician's health advocate. Dr. Buchanan is in demand as a guest conductor, somatic educator, and choral clinician in the United States and abroad. I am thrilled. I've seen Dr. Buchanan's work. I've spent time with her in the world of body mapping, and I'm excited that she is able to present to us in our state of Idaho. So without further ado, I'd like to present to you Dr. Heather Buchanan.
Thank you very much, Max. Thank you, everybody. It's lovely to see you all. I'm so sorry that we're not together in person. I was really excited to come to Idaho. I've never been to Idaho before, but one day. And as Max just mentioned, I've done a lot of work to try and make these presentations as interactive as possible. There is nothing worse than say and spray. You know, when you go to a conference and somebody just like throws stuff at you and you're left there glassy-eyed and wondering what just happened. So I just, in advance of that, I want to thank Eric Ness, who has been my tech go-to guy, and many of my friends and students who've been my guinea pigs. I've done more dress rehearsals for you guys than I think I've done for any concerts lately, because it's really important to me that this feels as close to you and I together in the same room. So I am going to just give you a warning. I'm going to ask you to move, if that's okay. And if you don't want to move, I won't take it personally. But I am going to offer up some things for you to try. And if you've got any questions, just put them in the chat and we'll get to them at the end of the presentation, just so that we can keep things kind of streamlined. I think I've been given the power of the screen share here. So let's see if I can get this called up for you all. with all the right things connected. And hopefully right now you should be looking at the title slide, which says Body Mapping Core Balance. And we're just going to skip right ahead to the traditional instructions for good posture. And I want to introduce you to my friend, Mr. Bones. I travel with him in a Cadbury chocolate tin, believe it or not. And I've had to put little notices on him because the airport security guys get quite excited when they see him in my luggage. In any case, we're going to talk a lot about structure and how it can help you get freedom of movement. We're also going to have a look at the hindrances to that. So let's try an experiment. You got to do this one on your own honor, okay? Have a look at those traditional instructions for good posture. So, and as you look at them, or as I say them, I would like you to try it. And I'd like you to be like the students in your ensemble rehearsal who are those A-type overachievers. I want you to be the kid that's so keen to please that you're going to take whatever the teacher says and do it to the nth degree. So how does it feel to stand up or sit up straight or sit up tall? And just do it and observe what you sense. Now let's take it one step further, and I want you to imagine your head pulled up by a string. That's a very common instruction. Don't relax, just keep into that posture. Now I want you to keep your back straight or keep your spine straight. Some of you might be wondering, what does that really mean? But we say it anyway, so let's do it. How about shoulders back, chest up high, bottom tucked under, abdominals firm? How many of you are sitting there thinking, why? Because if you think about it long enough, you'll start to realize this position that you're in right now is actually quite tense. So why are we saying things that have good intentions but elicit poor responses? I think it's because much of what we teach is done quickly. I know for myself, sometimes I say things in desperation. We have the blessing and the curse of working with the great unwashed. Unlike bands and orchestras where students have to have had some measure of instruction previously, anyone can come into the choir. And that's both a blessing and a curse. So then we have all these people that are enthusiastic, they want to try it. Maybe some of them are not enthusiastic, who knows? But the point is you've got this large group of people and you're trying to communicate a lot quickly so that you can really get to the good stuff. And I think that that's where some of these problems come in, because somebody heard somebody say something, saw somebody react some way, oh, and that seemed good, and so on they went. But how many of you really understand what these instructions mean? I mean, for example, I can give you a list of 10 reasons why these are really bad ideas. I have a handout that I share with my students, and it's entitled, Your Mother Was Wrong, 10 Reasons Why Good Posture is Bad for You. It's sensationalism, unashamedly, but it gets their attention. And very quickly they realize that these instructions decrease support for the body, they create tension and rigidity, make things tiring, it's a lot of extra work. It restricts their breathing capacity and their capacity to support the sound actively. For many, they notice that they get jaw tension. If they're standing, they'll notice that their legs are not as free to move as they need to be. It will limit arm and finger movement. Actually, all of these instructions take you off balance. In most cases, they're pulling you what we call sharp off your lumbar, and I'm going to teach you about that tonight. Because of this tension and this rigidity, we're impeding our students' ability to develop the kinesthetic sense, which is really crucial, because without kinesthesia connected to what they see, to what they hear, and in the case of instrumentalists, what they're touching, they're unable to be completely sure about where their bodies are in space. And the quality of sound that is made is determined by the quality of movement that generates that sound. So our musicality then becomes inhibited, and we have a lack of tonal variety simply because we've created rigidity when we really wanted good posture. So let's just talk for a moment about this mind-body connection. And many of the photos, in fact, all of the photos you will see tonight are my students. This is our production of Considering Matthew Shepard, which we performed in December last year. And as it turns out, it was the last time we performed together on campus before the pandemic took hold. So there's a lot of special connections for us with Matthew Shepard. The mind-body connection reminds us that however we move, we have information being supplied to our body via the brain. In other words, how you choose to move is determined by these neurological networks in your brain. They're called body maps. And we have them for every voluntary movement we do. For example, if I said to you, just fold your arms quickly without even thinking about it, just fold your arms. And then if I said on a count of 3, reverse it. 1, 2, 3, go. Most people can do that fairly quickly, but you do come across some people who are like, wait a minute, right hand over left, not sure. There are things that we do habitually and voluntarily that have become embedded in these networks. And we're just accustomed to feeling that way when we do it. The quality of the movements that we make as musicians determine our communication capabilities and the quality of our sound. In other words, you are your instrument in the way that you sing and you communicate. So it's important that students understand that this connection exists because it's an asset. And I'm going to give you a demonstration now. So on your trust, I would like you, please, to close your eyes. And I want you to listen to the effect of balance on my voice. Listen particularly to the vocal timbre and the intonation. And then I will demonstrate again when you have your eyes open. Here we go. Oh, oh. Now open your eyes and watch what I'm doing. And I'm going to use Mr. Bones here to demonstrate for you. So I started in balance, and then I moved into what we call forward head position. Oh, and I compressed everything forward. Then I came back to balance. Oh, oh, and I went into what I like to call back row baritone. In each of these cases, you will have heard changes in the vocal timbre. You will have heard changes in intonation. At no point did my voice cut out and stop singing. And that's actually part of the problem, because if your motor vehicle was as out of a line as my head-neck relationship was then, your car would not be driving. But the human body is incredibly adaptable, and we're very good at ignoring the signs that are right in front of us. So regardless of what's going on, we just keep pushing forward, because after all, what matters most? The pitch, the rhythm, the diction. So instead of considering the whole person, the whole instrument, and coming at it organically, we tend to end gain and try to get to the things that we think are more important, no matter how our singers are moving. So let's have a look at what nature gave us. In this slide here called Core Balance, you can see 3 pictures. On the left, you have my daughter Paige when she was exactly 13 months old. She's now 16. In the middle, you have an anatomical drawing of what we call ideal balance. And on the right, you have a piece of art by the American artist George Siegel. This is a gentleman from an installation called Street Crossing, and it's on our campus at Montclair State. My nickname for this guy is Old Mate. And one of the things that my students find fascinating is that this is actually a real person. George Siegel got a bunch of his friends. He wrapped them in paper mache. He made bronze castings out of those molds, and then he plastered them. And it's so interesting to see the difference in the posture between this figure here and the the baby on the left. Any of you with small children in your life know that at the age of 13 months, there is more brawn than brain. And children are not sitting there thinking head pulled up by a string, tummy tucked in, abs firm, shoulders back. Kids are just being. And that's one of the beautiful things about looking at children. We can learn a lot from the way they're naturally organized. Over here on the right with old mate, assuming that there is no osteoporosis or any other medical condition like that, it's safe to assume that this is the result of a lifetime of postural habits, and gravity is finally winning the war. You can actually see photographs of older people who don't look as old as this person, for want of a better expression, and that is because they've had an alignment that allows the weight of the head, which is here, to be delivered through the bony structure of the spine so that gravity does not cause problems with the posture, shortening of neck muscles and so forth. And I'm going to explain more to you about how to avoid that. So what I want you to think about here is how we can cultivate mechanical advantage by honoring our given structure and creating right relationships within our own bodies. I also want to inoculate you against two cultural viruses. The first one is called stand up straight. You're aware of that one. Here's the other. So what do you do with someone who looks overly rigid? I'm willing to bet that some of you have heard, oh, just relax. You need to relax more. Relax is actually not helpful either, because relax implies a lack of energy and a letting go, and in some case, a kind of compression that is equally as detrimental to the sound and the results that you're trying to get. So what do we say? Well, we're going to talk about poise. We're going to call balance. We're going to look at dynamic balance. And we're going to look at the words that you can use and the instructions you can give your choristers that will help bring them to a better usage. You're going to do this by leading by example. You're going to start with yourself. And it's my goal that for each session that I present this weekend, there will be at least one takeaway for you in each session that you can work with immediately. I hasten to add that you do not need to be an expert in body mapping in order to teach this stuff. Just take something you've learned tonight, play with it, have a go, and give your students an opportunity to try it. And I think you'll be very pleasantly surprised. So for those of you who love to keep notes, this is probably one of the most important slides of the night. We can find balance anywhere in our body that we have a joint, and there are many of them. But if we take care of the organization of ourselves at 6 major intersections in the body, everything else will unfold beautifully and easily. These major intersections are called the places of balance. Let me give you their names, and then we're going to work through all of them. Some of them we will find seated, some of them we will explore standing. And it's entirely up to you how much you participate. But I really do hope that you will experiment, because I'm allowing time at the end for questions. So let's start with the first place of balance, and that's called the AO joint. Its real name is the atlanto-occipital joint, but we just call it the AO joint, so it's less of a mouthful. The second place of balance is the lumbar spine. The third are the hip joints. The fourth are the knees. The fifth place of balance is the ankles, where we deliver weight into the arch of the feet. And the sixth place of balance is the arm structure. And some of you are probably wondering, why did I make the arm structure last? You'll find out the answer to that in my session tomorrow. We're going to talk about mapping the gesture and getting people really comfortable with how they can maximize their use of arms. So as musicians, in the ideal world, we're performing with a whole body that is supported and organized centrally around the core, which is our spine. And here you can see an image of the spine within the torso. And here we have a cross section of the spine. Let me show you a few things on the vertebral column as it's demonstrated in this picture here. So first of all, let's look at the sections we have. We have got 7 cervical vertebrae. We have 12 thoracic vertebrae. And that's important to remember. We're going to need those for our breathing session on Saturday. We have 5 lumbar vertebrae. And that's easy to remember because we have breakfast at 7, lunch at 12, and dinner at 5. Well, some of us have dinner at 5. And then we have, of course, the sacral and the coccyx areas. But we're going to be mostly concerned with the vertebrae here. If you look, you will see that there is the line of gravity. Whoops, sorry about that. That was the wrong flip of the finger. You will see the line of gravity goes right from here at the AO joint, which is where the skull balances on the atlas, which is the first vertebrae, all the way down through to the lumbar spine. And that's an important line of strength because that's the force of gravity, and that's where everything from above gets delivered into everything below. So we want to really talk about how are we organized, where is my head and my neck in relation to the rest of me. And if you look at this little cross section of the spine here, you will see that the spine has an ingenious design. I'm going to show you a little video that has a little bit more about that in a moment. But we've got 2 functions here in the spine that are interesting. We have weight bearing and weight delivering, which is made possible through this section. And then here in the back half, we have what we call the nerve protecting. And of course, we've got all these segments, which I'll explain in the video, which allow us to get more mobility and actually more strength. And of course, we have the intervertebral discs here that help to cushion and to provide protection and to stop the spine from injury. Weight bearing and weight delivery are 2 really important concepts when we are conducting. And I'm going to put it to you that what we do as conductors has a profound effect on the way our singers are able to phonate, how they will model themselves with their own posture. I've seen this repeatedly in festivals that I adjudicate. The students in the choir typically will mirror what they're seeing in terms of the leadership on the podium. And that's why I believe leading by example is very powerful. And there's a lot that you can do without having to go into excruciating detail. There's a lot you can do with small instructions and beautiful demonstrations. Let's have a quick look at the anatomy and the physiology of the human spine. This is a little 4-minute video that gets to explain a few things that I would normally show you in person with one of my models. Here we go.
The back is an intricate structure of bones, muscles, and other tissues that forms the posterior part of the body's trunk, from the neck to the hip bones and pelvis. The bones that form the core of the back structure are called the spine or spinal column. This stack of more than 30 bones, vertebrae, supports the upper body's weight and houses the spinal cord, the nervous system structure that carries signals which control the body's movements and convey its sensations. Each of the bones that make up the spinal column has a hole in the center, and when these bones are stacked, it creates a channel that surrounds and protects the spinal cord. The bones or vertebrae that make up the spinal column are not stacked directly on top of each other. There are spaces between them that are maintained by round spongy pads of cartilage called intervertebral discs. Each intervertebral disc is made up of 2 components, the annulus fibrosus and the nucleus pulposus. The annulus fibrosus is the tough outer portion of the disc. The nucleus pulposus is the inner gel material surrounded by the annulus fibrosus. These discs and the space between the bones that they fill give the lower back flexibility. The discs act much like shock absorbers throughout the spinal column to cushion the bones as the body moves. Bands of tissues called ligaments and tendons hold the vertebrae in place and attach the muscles of the back to the spinal column. Small nerves called roots enter and emerge from the spinal cord through spaces between the vertebrae. The spine has 4 regions. Starting from the top, there are 7 cervical or neck vertebrae, labeled C1 through C7, 12 thoracic or upper back vertebrae, labeled T1 through T12, 5 lumbar vertebrae, designated L1 through L5 in the lower back, and finally, the sacrum and coccyx, a group of bones fused together at the base of the spine. Intervertebral discs are located between each vertebra from C2 through S1. As we age, a number of changes can occur in the spine, which may contribute to or cause lower back pain. For example, the annulus surrounding each disc begins to develop tears and cracks, which can cause pain and inflammation. The discs also begin to lose the water that keeps them spongy and enables them to absorb shocks and help protect the spine. As the discs lose water, they become compressed or flattened, which reduces the space between the vertebrae. In turn, the facet joints that connect the vertebrae and allow for easy movement are compressed. Pressure builds on the cartilage that covers and protects the bones from rubbing directly against each other, which can damage the joints. These changes may result in looser, less stable movement, which further increases the process of degeneration. As part of this process, the tough outer ring of the discs may develop larger tears so that the nucleus bulges out, what is commonly called a slipped disc, pressing on the spinal nerves and causing inflammation. The vertebrae may also lose mineral content so that the bones become thinner and the spinal column becomes compressed or packed together, causing pain. Bone spurs caused by aging and overall use of the spine may also form on the vertebrae and press on the nerves of the spine.
So what I want to see if we can get really clear about is the importance of the spine, which is our core structure, and how we can release onto that spine and use it to our advantage. And to perhaps for some of you, and especially for those of you who consider yourselves short, one of the things I see in people is a lot of holding or pulling up. And I want to assure you that that spine is just so beautifully big and so beautifully designed to receive and deliver weight that if we could cooperate with the structure of the body, we would do a whole lot better than getting in the way with tension. So let's talk about this concept of tensegrity, which is a word that is contrived from the words tension and integrity. Tensegrity is a structural design principle that describes the relationship between every part of an organism and the mechanical system that allows them to integrate into a complete functional unit. The spine is a tensegral unit, for example. And one of the things that's wonderful about this construction and this concept of tensegrity is that it explains how, by achieving soft tissue balance, we're able to resist the negative forces of gravity. Weakness or injury in one part of our body will then cause the entire structure to shift. So trying to restore tensegral balance is important. There are ways to do this through chiropractic care, through physical therapy, through exercising, and through body mapping. And one of the things we teach people is how to find ease of use and optimize mechanical advantage. So I have a little model here with me, like the one that you see in your slide. And again, if I had it there with you, I would let you play it and pass it around, and you could see how incredibly resilient and how interesting it is to see this structure become compressed and then restored. And the point is that when one part moves, every part moves. So for example, if I press here, look at the way other parts of the structure have to move to compensate. And it's the same with your neck. Try this just at home for a moment. So sit there and find what you think is balance with your head and your neck. And then I want you to shift slightly. So let's go into a little bit of a turtle position. You know that can't quite see on the computer screen, and so we drag our heads down and forward to look. And then hold it. And now notice, with that movement and that shift in balance, what other parts of your structure have to compensate in order to allow you to preserve this position? You can relax now. Some of you are probably finding, well, that was quite uncomfortable. Yet that's a postural choice that I see a lot on my campus, with students coming down to cell phones, or saxophone players who open the case and start to pull their heads down before they've even got the neck strap on. So let's see if we can teach you about these places of balance so that you can start to experiment with what it feels like to find balance. For those of you taking notes, balance is the place in which movement in any direction is easiest. Some people call it the place of no work. I call it the place of optimal work. It's the place where you feel easy and comfortable. There is no strain and there is no effort. So let's go to the AO joint. As you can see on the slide, this is the place where the skull rests on the atlas. And I happen to have a model here with me just to show you this lovely motion that we get at the AO joint. So we have the occiput, which is this base section of the skull, and then we have the atlas at the top. And you can see how the occipital bone balances in the atlas as a result of these little condyles that I'm going to indicate with the mouse here. So our head is literally just rocking on the top of the spine. Now the question is, can you find that in your own body? So in order to do that, I need you to take your thumbs, put them in your ears, join your index fingers at the base of the nose, flip one hand to the back of the head and feel that little bump that we have at the base of the occipital bone, and imagine you're drilling in front to back and side to side. And that is where your AO joint is located. It's one place that has more sense receptors in it than any other part in the body, which is very helpful for us because it's the only way that we can really be sure of what we're doing there. So if you look at Mr. Bones here, you can see this lovely rocking motion that he can achieve there. You can get that too, right? So the easiest movement for us to do is what I call the yes, that little nod. So we're rocking at the AO joint. See how it feels to just sit and be with that without using any extra force. And I'm going to actually teach you a neck stretch in a moment for those of you who'd like a little bit more help with that. Now, here's a couple of things to consider. Forward head posture, or FHP, is actually a major problem. It's a postural choice that has a direct effect on the pain that we experience in the spine and the back. It can be the cause of headaches, issues with mood, blood pressure, pulse, and even restrictions in lung capacity. We're going to do some experimenting with that ourselves in just a moment. Here are some of the most common causes of forward head posture. And it's because we live in a forward-facing world that we sort of find ourselves inclined this way. Smartphones, heavy backpacks that are worn incorrectly, computer ergonomics. Many people are using laptops, which were never intended to be used as the main computer all the time. So getting the laptop screen up and being able to resist this pulling down and forward, very important. Video games, television, and there can be trauma as well, falls and whiplash. Now here's the thing, here are two things that I need you to really think about. First of all, when your neck muscles tense, your whole body tenses. I did a lovely little experiment with students in my communication class yesterday, and I said to them, okay, just try smiling, they were trying to communicate with each other through Zoom, many of them, and we were looking at the subtleties of movement and things you could do with just the smallest little gesture of the head and the face and the eyes and so forth. Then I said, right, now tense your neck, now try and do those same things. And instantly they realized, well, that just isn't possible. It's true, because the superficial muscles, which we use for all of that expression, they are compromised with tension. Here's the other little factoid. Have a look at this picture. So you can see here the line of gravity coming this far forward. The weight of the average adult head is anywhere between 8 and 16 pounds. So let's say her head weighs 10 to 12 pounds. For every inch that she comes forward off balance, her head weighs an additional 10 pounds. So if she's 3 inches off balance, her head is now going to be 30 pounds heavier than it was when she was at neutral. That's why old mate in the early slide that I showed you ended up with that posture, because it's a choice. Over time, gravity will win, and your body will go through pathologic change in order to compensate. So you can see in this picture here the influence of neck muscles. When we have freedom in the neck, there is a lengthening and a release that allows us to retain or regain natural mobility. When the neck is overly tight, we then get this compression and, of course, some sort of forward turtling or compression. Have a look at this cross section of the neck. You can see here the vertebrae, we've got the trachea, the esophagus, we've got our thyroid gland. Everything else that's dark gray here is muscle. So at the back of the neck, it is mostly muscle. So what I'd like to do is teach you some hello work neck stretches to try and help you find some freedom. If you have any kind of neck injury, just sit this one out. But for those of you who are feeling fine, I'd like you to try the following, and you can do this seated or standing. I'm going to stay seated just so you can see me in the camera view. We're going to stretch to what we call the stretch point, which is where we take the fascia and we challenge it to get it to release so that we can get rid of that excessive tension that we can become habituated to. When you do stretch point stretching, it's 10 seconds. It is a gentle, consistent pressure. There's no bouncing. We don't move quickly. Follow the instructions carefully, because if you don't, you'll undo the good. So let's start by linking our fingers on the back of the head like this. And I want you to pull your head down until you feel a burning sensation in the neck. So it's not meant to be comfortable. It's actually there to challenge the fascia. So stretching down for 10 seconds, and the weight of your arms will help add weight to the force of gravity. Keep breathing. And when you get to the end of the 10 seconds, don't move your head. Remove your hands. Don't move your head yet. Just notice the difference arm weight removed makes. Now bring your right hand fingertips to your forehead and use your hand to guide your head back to neutral. And we're looking to see if we can get the base of the nose parallel with the floor in the same way that Mr. Bones has here. Don't map the jaw in that. Think base of the skull, base of the nose to the back of the occipital bone. Now you're going to, if you're standing, I need you to lock your knees. If you're seated, you're fine. I want you to all close your teeth, and I want you to let your head roll back. And you're going to now feel a stretch that goes all the way down to your collarbones. And you're going to leave that there for 10 seconds. Keep breathing through your nose. And when you get to the end of 10 seconds, I want you to bring a hand to the back of your head and gently and mindfully guide your head back to neutral. And if you were standing, you noticed that when you brought your head back to neutral, your knees unlocked. Count to 5. Any discomfort should go away. And now we need to stretch the sides. You have a choice. You can either go straight over the shoulder or you can do side front. You choose what feels more comfortable for you. I'm going to go just to the side tonight. So I'm going to take my left hand. I'm going to pull my head toward the left. And I'm going to use the weight of my arm to help intensify that stretch down the side of the neck. And for 10 seconds, I'm going to feel that burn. And when I get to the end of 10 seconds, I don't move the head by itself. I put my fingertips to the head and I gently guide my head back to neutral, and I wait for 5 seconds for any discomfort to pass. Some of you might feel like your head wants to flop back the way it was. That's because literally you've stretched one side more than the other. So let's even it up. And I can tell you that my symphonic choir of 165 students, they love this, and the room is quiet. You could hear a pin drop because we start every rehearsal with stretching. And always our necks. Now, in an ideal world, you're going to do this 3 times in each direction. It takes less than 3 minutes to do it. And it's one of the loveliest ways to help recover quickly some buoyancy and some release in the neck. And some of you might already feel just a little better for having done that. Now, the other thing I want you to think back to is where your ears are. So if you've got a mirror or someone there who can look at you, just check, are your ears over the side of your torso? Because when we get head balance, that's what we're looking for. Don't think ears in relation to shoulders, because if your shoulders are out of line, then you're going to orient yourself in the wrong way. But I want you to find the side of your torso and check, are your ears over the side? So it's like a golf ball on the tee, beautifully balanced. Or think of a bowling ball and how you would beautifully balance that if you had to hold it up this way. And that's the kind of alignment you're looking for with the head and the neck in relation to the spine. Now we're going to go from the AO joint to the lumbar spine. And the lumbar vertebrae are the 5 largest in the spine, and they do a tremendous job of receiving weight from above and then helping to deliver weight into structures below, which is significant when we are seated. The lumbar spine is here in the body. So you're going to find it by taking your hands and tracing down the sides of your body until you get to your pelvic crest, which is here. Now I want you to come from the pelvic crest to the center of the body until you can feel just below your belly button. And if you were to drill in from front to back and side to side, you would be here at the bottom of L3, the top of L4. And you can see in our model here that that is the most forward curve in the body. So lining up the forward curve of the cervical spine here at the AO joint and then down to the lumbar spine, these are the 2 forward curves in the spine. That's your first primary crucial relationship for getting this to work. The head and the thorax balance over the lumbar vertebrae. One way that I demonstrate that to my students is to show them how my body organizes itself when I walk backwards quite quickly. And there's a lovely sense of shift. You can try that, just make sure you're not going near stairs or anything that could trip you up. But that's another lovely way to help find that sense of balance. So the important thing is to locate those lumbar vertebrae by finding the pelvic crest and then coming in and seeing where you are in relation to your navel. The third place of balance are the hip joints. On the left-hand side here, you can see hip joints at neutral. So we have a ball and socket joint, which allows us for a great deal of mobility, okay? And then when we sit, we're going into our sit bones, which are here. So again, arches being the natural strong form in nature, and we've known that for hundreds and hundreds of years. So there's a beautiful design that our Creator had in mind for us. So weight coming down through the spine and distributing through the pelvis, through the sacral joints, through the sacral area here. These are the sacroiliac joints, out through the hip joints. When we're standing, then down through the femur, into the knees, and then into the floor. Or if we're seated, through our sit bones. And if you have a look, you'll see that the sit bones are lower than the hip joint, which is really significant. How many of you think that you actually sit on your legs? And how many of you know that you actually sit on your butt? You actually sit on your sit bones. So one of the things that I love to do when I'm getting my students to map this, because there's all sorts of myths about how you're supposed to sit in choir, is that I get them to put their hands under their butts, and we'll do this in a moment, and get them to find where those bones are and what it's like to actually deliver weight into them. Before I do that, let me just show you a trick with Mr. Bones. So the halfway point in the human being is actually the hip joint, not the waist. Look at that. Top of head to bottom of feet. There's your physical halfway. And as conductors, that's really significant too. And we'll explore that a little bit more tomorrow when we play. We're going to try some conducting and some movement experiments from this place of balance we're talking about tonight. Because when our arms are in motion, we need supportive movement from the hips, knees, and ankles as well. So we know that the hip joints are the halfway point. Waist is a waist, for those of you who like homophones. And I want you to map your hip joints at neutral when you're standing and sitting. So let's do that right now. Let's start by mapping our hip joints standing. So I'm going to stand with you. And what I would like you to do is to take your right hand, and I want you to place it on the front of your pelvis, and take your left hand, and I want you to place it on the back of your sacrum. I want you to start by seeing if you can get your hands basically parallel. And then we're going to move our pelvis. So first of all, I want you to go into what I call duck butt, which is a hyperextended pelvis. So our hands are tilted this way. Notice how that feels. How many of you feel your knees locking? You should, because now your shoulders are being kind of thrown back to try and compensate. This is what we call going sharp off the lumbar, and it causes a lot of pressure and lower back pain and tension. Now I want you to bring your hands and your pelvis through a range of motion toward neutral. And you'll find that when you get to neutral, your knees unlock. It's just a magical moment when that can happen. But let's find the full range of motion, and let's move our hands this way so that we can get into what I call tuck butt, right? So there's a range of motion from hyperextended to neutral and then tucked. And that's a great range of motion to have, but when you are singing and conducting, you don't want to get stuck in duck butt or tuck butt. You actually want to be around neutral. Now, let's find the seated balance. Take your hands, put them on your butt, and sit on your hands, okay? And fish around until you can feel those sit bones, right? If you're in a hard chair, it will be quite uncomfortable for your fingertips because you're feeling a lot of weight coming down to those sit bones. But that's how you know you're doing it correctly. Now, let's try this. I want you to sit up straight. So sit up straight and notice what just happened to your sit bones. All of a sudden, your pelvis hyperextended. Now, instead of delivering weight into the sit bones, we're pushing forward into the pubis and creating tension in our lower back. So let's come back to neutral. Find that place where you're delivering weight into the sit bones and your hands can feel it. Now let's try the middle school slump. So let's just relax and slouch back. And now you feel your sit bones have angled forward and you're tending to drive weight back into your coccyx or your tailbone. I've done a lot of flights around the world. And let me tell you, when you're flying for nearly 24 hours to get to Australia, you do not want to be sitting on your tailbone. Airline seats are notoriously uncomfortable. Getting yourself organized so that weight delivery is into your sit bones is advantageous for keeping yourself focused and for keeping yourself pain-free. Have a look at these photos of seated balance. The left-hand side is my daughter. She's an equestrian rider, and that's her favorite horse, Flapjack. You couldn't sit on a horse if you had to sit on your legs to be balanced. Because our legs are external to the torso, as you can see here, we are able to sit on things and wrap our legs around them. The right-hand photo is me when I was 1 year old. And again, it's quite amazing what we can do with babies. Sit them there and there they go. Even with their big old heads, babies are still able, and especially able, to find that balance that's so important. In this slide, you can see the weight delivery into the sit bones. For those of you that are church musicians, getting yourself organized on the bench to deliver weight through the front of the spine and into the sit bones is going to free your legs for the pedaling that you need to do. So we want the pelvic arch to deliver weight into the sitting bones, and we want our upper body weight centered over the hip joints and the pelvic rockers, not thrown back over the nerve protecting half of the spine. Now let's stand up again and play with our knees. So we're looking for upper body weight to be distributed through the knees to the ankles when we are standing, okay? If we lock our knees, let's try that now. So lock your knees. This is a compensation to try and stabilize the body and to limit pressure on lumbar discs. But it also causes problems in the circulatory system. And if you've got people who are regularly fainting in performance, it's often because they're chronic knee lockers, and that's causing problems with how the body's registering a lack of flow of oxygen to the brain. So remember what we did before with the pelvis. When the pelvis was at neutral, it was much easier to find soft or balanced knees. But the minute we hyperextended and pulled shoulders back, we got locked knees. Of course, bent knees are fine too, and very useful when we're conducting, but there are many times when we need them to not be in a state of bend. It's just preferable to be at balance because there's much less effort there. Bent knees requires some kind of compensation. So while you're standing there, let's think about your ankles. So it's all about the arches. Here you can see that the arch of the foot, which extends from the heel to the ball, is where the weight is being delivered. And before people scream and say, but I'm flat-footed, we've got multiple arches. And yes, it's true. People who are flat-footed have some additional challenges. I know that. I have a daughter who's flat-footed. My mother was flat-footed. But the fact of the matter is it doesn't stop you from functioning well. It just means you need extra arch support, and you get out of those long marches if you're in the military. Well, I think it was true wasn't it World War II? They didn't accept you into the infantry if you had flat feet. Certainly that was the joke in the family. My grandfather was a Navy man. In any case, the weight is coming down the front of the leg into the ankle, and then it's distributed into the arch from the calcaneus through to the ball. Now, we've got arches in all sorts of places here. So you can see that we've got this transverse arch as well, which is incredibly important. And I'm going to get you to experiment with that with me right now. So let's stand again. Let's see if we can just organize ourselves. Think about finding neutral at the AO joint, getting your AO joint over your lumbar spine. Think about the alignment of the hip joints. So hip joints are up here. We want the pelvis at neutral. We want to keep our knees soft. And now we're delivering weight into the arches. How does it feel if you're concentrating the weight over the balls of your feet? There are some people who believe that you sing better if you're over the balls of your feet. So let's go there and see what we have to do in order to preserve that. So what muscles do you notice are compensating in order to do that? How many of you are gripping with your toes? How many of you have actually noticed that you're gripping in the back of the neck? And some of you may even be holding in the jaw. Now come back to neutral. Feel that release, which is lovely. Now let's try background baritone. So let's stand up straight and throw the weight more back over the heels. Shoulders pull back a little bit like the school marching band instruction. If you didn't have abs, you've got them now. And some of you will find your toes are curling the other way. And others of you may find that your quads are also gripping as well. In this position, I also have a lot of tension in the back of the neck. None of that helps me sing well. What helps me sing well is when I'm organized to deliver weight into the floor or to the seat so that my body can be optimally free to breathe, articulate, and express. Tomorrow we're going to talk about mapping the arms, but let's just do a little bit of arm structure to get you started. First of all, if you look at this slide, you will see that we have a view from the top, looking down. So here's the vertebra of the spine, here are the ribs, here's the collarbone, and here's the shoulder blades. Experiment with your shoulders just for a moment and just tell me where they set naturally. Are you someone who tends to be more rounded and forward? Are you someone who is used to being pulled back? Certainly that's the way I was raised. I always sat tall and had my shoulders pulled back. So for me, coming to balance initially felt like I was kind of slumpy. F.M. Alexander had a term for that: debauched sensory perception. It's an incredible term, debauched sensory perception. In other words, what you are doing is not what you think you are doing or what you should be doing. So the idea is that our arm structure has the collarbones and the shoulder blades elegantly balanced over the ribs so that the weight of the arms is delivered into the weight-bearing part of the spine, and our arms therefore have a freedom and a support that they wouldn't otherwise have if we felt that we were being dragged forward or pulled back or pulled up or pulled down. So tomorrow we're going to play with the arms and see what we can find as to how that relates to what we're doing musically. In the work that I do as a somatic educator, I teach a class called Problems of Performance at Montclair State. And part of that course allows for the students to come in and do a 20-minute coaching with me. They come in and I ask them, okay, find balance. This is Jonathan. We're using these pictures with Jonathan's permission. So John's a violist. I love working with string players. It's a revelation for them when they can get out of that down and forward position that's so common with upper strings. And this was John's idea of balance when he first came in. Over a period of 20 minutes, I talked to him about what he saw, what he felt, and he reorganized himself into the picture that you see on the right. That was all him. I just asked the questions. He used his eyes, he used his thought processes, he used his kinesthesia, and we were able to get him to a place of ease very quickly. My point is that it's your choice. If we are willing to pay attention to the choices that we make, then finding ease and poise is something that just becomes a natural part of our being and how we present ourselves as a musician, as a teacher, and so forth. So that brings me to the final slide. Mind, body, spirit, music. Our mind determines the way we will use our body because of these neurological networks called body maps. If we have this relationship well organized, then that allows the spirit and the music to be free. I see a lot of people who have great ideas. They're very musical, but they're suffering from pain, they're limited by tension, and they're frustrated. And sadly, some of those people never really pursue music, either as an avocation or a vocation, because there's just something about it that gets them frustrated. There are 3 enemies to fluid poised movement: tension, misalignment, and excessive force. And any one or combination of those 3 is going to get in the way of your music making. So our theme for this virtual conference is Embodied and Expressive. Embodied performing means a wholeness of experience, experiencing yourself as one integrated being, not a collection of isolated parts. And having the freedom to move so that you can sing and conduct without any limitations on your musical imagination. The research is clear, as high as anywhere from 75 to 85% of musicians will report some kind of playing related injury or discomfort or pain in their lifetime. Medicine is very successful at helping musicians deal with medical problems. But as many as 95% of musicians find that their problem isn't medical, it's actually related to technique and how they're approaching the mechanics of what they're doing. So if you believe that we have the privilege of deciding how our minds and our bodies will respond, if we are physically balanced and grounded, then we have a very powerful means by which our voice, our spirit, and our musical imagination can be unleashed. Without this, our musical potential is just trapped in a body that is ill-equipped to express the passion and the emotion of the music. As I say to my students, cultivate the ability to be truly free in your music making. That is both a gift and a responsibility. And this picture I love. It's taken a while ago now, but this is my symphonic choir, the chorale, and our symphony orchestra. And we were preparing Robert Livingston Aldridge's Parables for the regional premiere. I have some references and resources here that I want to mention to you. If you want to be in touch with me, you can contact me at buchanan@montclair.edu. If you want to know more about body mapping, the Association for Body Mapping Education is bodymap.org. My website is in the process of being updated. It's a bit of a mess at the moment, but you're always welcome to look at that, heatherjbuchanan.com. And here are a number of references that I highly recommend. The Structures and Movement of Breathing is a very affordable primer about breathing for choirs and choruses. And I will be referencing that on Saturday. Move Well, Avoid Injury is a terrific DVD that was developed by Barbara Conable and Amy Leichar, and is a lovely summary of a lot of these principles that we're talking about. If you're interested in hardcore voice and you want something that aligns beautifully with voice pedagogy and body mapping, I recommend What Every Singer Needs to Know About the Body. And Melissa and Kurt and Mary Jean have just come out with the 4th edition, and it's got some really fantastic companion website information there. Bonnie Drainer has also come up with the breathing book, and getting a forward by Thomas Hampson, I'm sure you'll agree, is a pretty impressive achievement. Bonnie's also another Andover educator. We used to be called that. We're now the Association for Body Mapping. So she's a licensed body mapping educator, as I am. And then I've written 2 chapters. One of them is called Enhancing Musical Performance Through Somatic Pedagogy. That's in volume 2 of the GIA choral series, Teaching Music Through Performance and Choir. And I also did a chapter in Teaching Singing in the 21st Century by Scott Harrison and Jessica O'Brien. So I'm going to stop the screen share and hopefully get everybody back. I think people can see me. Eric, you know how we were joking about that lovely little blue screen that my husband built for me? It fell down in the middle of my presentation. So he's going to be really sad about that. So it'll be fixed by tomorrow. But what I will do in order to not be distracting is I am going to give you guys a virtual background. And the one you're getting is my Matthew Shepard. So there it is. And I'm going to take questions. So I believe we've got 12 minutes. Is that enough time to take questions?
So I have a couple of questions that appeared during the chat during your presentation, and so I thought we could start with those.
Please.
The first question had to do with one of your original slides. It says, in those original 7 instructions, are we not supposed to follow those? Are those bad instructions? That was the question that was written in the chat.
Correct. They're well-intentioned instructions that result in poor responses. So in other words, don't stand up straight. Don't have your head pulled up by a string. Instead, you want to come to poise. You want to come to your center. You want to release your weight onto your core. By asking students to stand up straight, for example, you're asking them typically to generate tension and hyperextend. So yes, correct. These are poor instructions. The funny thing around me, people say is, we don't use the posture word, right? So if you say posture around me, you know, my students know it's like, okay, you're going to get fined. We don't use the P-bomb. We go instead for words like poised or dynamic or buoyant or core. And here's the thing, it doesn't take very long. Years and years ago, before my daughter was born, I had a community choir. I used to call them my reality choir. And they had singers in it from ages 16 to 86. I loved them. They were great. And I did 10 minutes of body mapping at the beginning of every rehearsal. When I took over this choir, they would assiduously avoid coming on time because they didn't want to go to the warm-up because they thought that was a waste of time. Okay, that's your choice. So we started doing our thing pretty soon. They were there early. Nobody wanted to miss out. And I knew we had a winner when Shirley in the first sopranos, who was in her 70s, said, I ironed today without lower back pain, because they were starting to find ways to introduce this information into their everyday life, which is brilliant, right? Students who say to me, I drove home for spring break and I didn't have lower back pain. It's like, yes, right? So this is all about cultivating ease and awareness in the body. And yeah, I know in 1 hour in a conference presentation, I probably make it sound easier than it is for some of you. But honestly, little bit by little bit, you could, even if you just took one aspect of this tonight, the one I would encourage you to do is the neck stretches and find your head neck relationship. Start with that. That one matters most of all. And then over the next couple of days, we will go into the others. What's the next question, Max?
Next question had to do with your spine slide.
Yes.
What if someone doesn't have that inward lower spinal curve? Does that affect a singer's sound?
That's a really good question. So it depends why they may not have that curve. I mean, if somebody, is that Catherine? Do you want to add to that?
I was born without a lower spinal curve. We call it hypolordosis.
Yes, I was just going to say I wanted to know whether it was the way somebody was born or whether it was the way it was the result of surgery or an accident or something like that. So it's let me backtrack by saying all of us have got something we're dealing with, right? All of us have got something we have to compensate. For example, there are probably people here tonight who've got one leg longer than the other, and that makes a difference to certain things. All of us have got something. So I know plenty of people who have hypolordosis and they sing beautifully. It just means that they have to make some compensations and some adjustments. So what we're teaching here are principles that will try to help you maximize what you have, and then you're going to adapt it to your truth. For example, I've worked with people who have severe rheumatoid arthritis. Now, my mother was one of those people. So if you've got severe rheumatoid, you're not running around wasting your energy. You've only got so much movement in a day before you're done and the pain is too much. And what I've found is while body mapping isn't a cure for that, It is an aid to helping people maximize what movement they do have. Does that make sense? The same with fibromyalgia. I've had students who have that, and they've had tremendous relief from that as well. Yeah. Next question.
Next question is, do you have any advice or information about seated singing in regard to feet on the floor for either tall individuals or much less tall?
We could do a whole conference on that one. And this is where I need to take, you need to come into my classroom at Montclair State, because we have Wenger posture chairs in 3 sizes. So how many of you are tall people? Like, who in the world? Yeah. Oh, listen, I am 5'7.5". I am the smallest person in my family. My youngest nephew is 6'10". His older brother is 6'8". My sister's 6'2". I mean, yeah, I am the petite one of the family, and I'm by no means a petite woman. So yeah, I get it. When you're a tall person and everybody wants you to scrunch into that kind of one size fits all world, that's really hard work. But it's also really hard work for the petite people. Somehow my daughter got the short genes from my husband's mother's side of the family. So I've got this 16-year-old who wishes she was as tall as me, and she's trying to make herself 3 inches taller than she actually needs to be. So she needs to sit on a chair that's got shorter legs than I do. So to get really lovely, stable balance, you actually should have your feet contacting the floor. When I see young children at the piano with legs dangling, I just go crazy, because they're doing all sorts of other things that aren't helpful. Put a step stool underneath their feet to help them find that position of balance. So what you want to do, and I'll explain this verbally, and when my husband fixes the blue screen tonight, I'll show you again tomorrow, remind me. You want to sit on your sit bones in a position that allows your feet to contact the floor. So if you're really short, you're gonna have to wriggle yourself to the front of the chair, right? Get your feet on the floor. That's a secondary source of support. The primary source of support is the sit bones. I love seeing all these people trying this out. This is great. Max, we're keeping track of the people who look like they're consciously working, and we're going to have prizes at the end of this conference. I just know it. Okay, right? First prize is dinner for 2 at Max's. Second prize is dinner for 2 at Eric's. Okay, I'm kidding. Right. So then if you're a taller person, what are you going to do? Well, you're going to wriggle your tush back, and you're going to go further back into the chair. That was the rest of the screen. It just fell down. Don't worry, I'm quite fine. Peter! It's actually really funny. You should see it. It's actually really funny. Anyway, it's been up for 3 days. I guess that was enough. So you're going to sit further back in the chair with your feet on the floor, right? And your back supported by the chair. It is a myth that you have to be sitting on the front of the chair in order to have good posture in choir. That is complete and utter nonsense. You need to be on your core. You need to be over your sit bones and beautifully free. And I will tell you that I model that all the time. I sit on a high stool sometimes. I'm mostly standing when I conduct. But my goal is that whenever my students are looking at me, they're seeing the freedom that they want to emulate. And it really does work. Yeah. Max.
That is all of the questions that I have in the chat, but I'm looking at faces, and I see Serena Clark has a question. So we'll take Serena's, and then I see Andrew Seeley with a hand up. So we'll
Fantastic. Okay, so let's go to Serena first. Hi, Serena.
Hi, Heather. Thank you so much. This was really interesting, and I learned a couple things about myself. I stand better than I sit. That's the important takeaway I had. I sit in my pelvis. It was mind-blowing. 2 quick questions. The first, after we did the neck stretches at the beginning, that was lovely, but I felt like one side of my body was just a little bit heavier than the other. How common is that, and how can we work through that ourselves and or with our students?
Okay, that's a beautiful observation. And I just want to congratulate Serena on having the awareness to notice that. to just backtrack a bit, Serena, I've had students accuse me of making their lives worse because they didn't feel any pain until they came into my class, and now they can't stop thinking about all the things that are wrong with them. And I love that, because what it means is they're finally paying attention, right? So the fact that you were paying attention and aware of that, that's the first step. Okay. So what I would say is you need to do things multiple times to actually really figure out what's going on. So doing it just once, it's possible that you may have stretched for longer on one side than the other. Was it your right side or your left side? Are you right-handed or left-handed?
I felt heavier in my left side, and I am left-handed.
And yeah. So again, it's funny. Some people will have their dominant side feel heavier. Other people, it's the reverse. It just depends on what habitual patterns you were interrupting when you did that. So when we do this stretching, we're actually challenging the fascia. People talk about muscle memory, but that's also a myth. It's actually neurological memory, right? Because muscles don't have brains. Okay. So part of it is you disrupted some kind of a pattern that you were familiar with, and that was your body's way of responding to it. It's not entirely a bad thing. What I would encourage you to do is to do those stretches. So this is what I say to my students who are really serious about getting freedom in the neck. Do them the 3 times as I taught you, and do them at least twice a day. And if you've done a big practice session or something like that, do it then as well. And I have found through the work I've done with my students that the ones who commit to it regularly find that their bodies uncoil faster. And some of them will get beyond that heavy feeling, and then after a while they get the light feeling. So initially they feel heavy, but then eventually they will get a more buoyant release. So that's in the category of take it away. It's like new jeans, right? Take them on, try them on, play them out, you know, walk around in them for a while and see how it feels. And maybe let me know how you're doing tomorrow and Saturday. I'd be really curious to see what you find out. Yeah. Right. Who is our next person?
Thank you.
Andrew?
My pleasure.
Yep, that's me. All right.
Hi, Andrew.
Yeah. Thanks so much for all of this. This is really informative, and I feel like it's really gonna help me with singing and all that. I've also got 2 questions, but they're both about feet. One about sitting and then one about standing. So when we're sitting, we have our feet flat on the floor. Should we have our feet more back towards our body or more forward towards the chair, or kind of find like kind of a central place in between?
Okay, Max, you didn't prepare me for all the good questions. This is great. No, this is really great. You have no idea how excited I am, because I was so nervous all week that people would be like, oh my God, when's she going to stop? And there'd be no questions. This is a really good question. And the answer, Andrew, is your feet can go wherever they're comfortable. In fact, you want your feet to move around. How many of you are sitting there trying to find posture, and then you're like, after 10 minutes, you're like, I really like to move. So move. You can find posture 50 different ways. You can find freedom in lots of different ways. Human bodies were meant to be mobile. If you teach in elementary education, you know this, right? Children have this instinctive awareness that they need to be active. So with your feet, I would put my feet, for example, if I'm about to stand, I will bring my feet further back toward the edge of the chair so that when I stand, I'm just pushing straight up, right? But at other times, I will vary it, and I might put the left foot in front of the right, or the right in front of the left. I'll move it around, and I will have variety as long as I'm feeling comfortable in that position. So yes, there's no one place to put your feet. Put them where they're comfortable. Okay.
And another kind of question about the feet, this kind of refers to both sitting and standing. Like when we've got them flat on the floor, how do we want them positioned? Do we want them straight? Do we want them turned out or turned in? Like what are
excellent question. Okay, everybody stand up. Everybody stand up. Let's do this. Okay, now look down at your feet and tell me, if I was about to strap some inline skates or some skis onto your feet, where would your body end up? Have you got Disney feet? Are you turned out like this? Because I tell you what, that will be really awkward. Or are your feet parallel? right? So you actually ideally want your feet parallel. Now, if you're used to having your feet slightly turned out, asking you to bring your feet parallel is going to make you feel like you're pigeon-toed, right? Or knock-kneed. So it's going to take you a little while to get used to that, because there's muscles that have shortened and done other things to compensate for that. Some of you might have, look at the wear pattern on the bottom of your shoe and see whether or not you're wearing on the outside, or are you a pronator? Are you a supinator? Have you got a nice even wear pattern? Do you scuff on the heel? You know, all of that is a tell as to what you're doing with your feet. So what I'm going to ask you to do, because you're going to have to do this tomorrow anyway, right? So let's get the weight of our body over our feet parallel. Sorry, I can't go any further back because my backdrop just collapsed. So I'm sort of stuck here. So I'll just watch you. So you want your feet parallel, right? And you want to deliver the weight of your body evenly into both feet, right? So just see if you can shift from side to side, forward to back, and you can just kind of feel that lovely mobility there. Now, you want your feet underneath your hip joints, right? So here's your hip joints. I don't want your feet shoulder width apart. I want them under your hip joints. So find the outer edge of the thigh, come into the middle here, right? Bend and get your feet parallel underneath there. And that is the place where you're going to be tallest, leanest, and the most buoyant. You can jump forward, back, side. You can go in any direction from that place, right? And you're going to be much less likely to get yourself into a tuck, what I call tuck butt, and then compress down like this when you're conducting. Yeah. Ladies, I find that the girls tend to go more into a hyperextended pelvis, and especially people that like walking around in high heels a lot, that just becomes normal for them. So then when you try to get them out of that, their lower backs have a lot of tension. It takes a while for that connective tissue in the lower back to release. But I've got my Swiss ball here, so I can show you a ball drape, and I can sort of show you some things there to try and ease that out if any of you are interested. Catherine, your question.
Actually, it's a comment on the pelvis thing you said. You can actually develop the ability to tell when your pelvis and your hip bones are out of alignment, as in like your socket, your joint, one is higher up than the other. And you can tell by walking, because if one leg is going farther backward or farther forward and the other one is the opposite way, then there's obviously something different when you're walking. You might not tell standing up, aside from maybe leaning on one side more often, but walking is the easiest way to tell.
Right. You're quite correct. And what you're also saying here is that you need to pay attention, right? So Catherine's point is well taken, that when you're paying attention to what you're doing, you're able to figure it out. And this is how this whole line of work started. You're all familiar with the Alexander technique. Have you heard about the Alexander technique? So that started with FM Alexander. And it all started because he was an actor who kept losing his voice, and no doctor could help him. And finally, he surrounded himself in a room with mirrors, and he observed, he watched what he was doing, and came to these amazing conclusions about primary control and other factors and other principles that are important. Our friend, Mr. Feldenkrais, he was another one, an engineer, and had done judo and karate and so forth. And then he ended up with bad knees and told, oh, 50-50 chance on the surgery. And he's like, no way. So he talked to Alexander. He did a lot of observing on his own and so forth. Irmgard Bartnief, she's done the same thing in the dance world. And so it is with body mapping. Body mapping was developed by musicians for the needs of musicians. I didn't go into all the science of this because there wasn't time, but just to give you a sense, when we are working at a high level of performance, the neurological activity in our bodies that connects to the voluntary movement is so sophisticated, we light up more things on those little scientific experiments than neuroscientists, like surgical neurosurgeons, and astronauts. Working at a high level of performance is one of the most complex things known to humankind. So if you're teaching children to play music, just think for a minute about what a great gift you're giving them, but how complex it is, right? I think it's interesting that as a population, professional musicians have the lowest incidence of degenerative diseases of the brain. Why? Nobody's really come to any strong conclusions, but I think I know why. Because it's use it or lose it. I mean, we're requiring ourselves to do pretty extraordinary things. And we know that people who are moving regularly, it's the same with exercise, movement and really engaging with the brain and coordination makes a tremendous, tremendous difference through our lifetime and especially in our older years. I think children give up on music a lot because it's uncomfortable, it hurts, they don't like it, because they're frustrated. New York State did a study and found out that most kids quit string playing because it was uncomfortable. Well, whose fault's that? That's not the kid, that's us. Are we really teaching our children how to experience freedom? Are we as concerned with how they're moving as what pitches they're singing? So, you know, for me, it's about putting music education on a somatic foundation. I want to prehab people, not rehab them. And, you know, at this point, we're still doing a lot of rehab. But if we could teach well with this somatic foundation, we could prehab a whole generation. And I will tell you that the doctors that are working with musicians' injuries would love that, because they're finding that education is the most powerful preventative tool that we have for keeping people injury and pain free, if they want to be actively involved in music. So that's a pretty big claim, and that comes from a lot of research. I'm a member of the Performing Arts Medicine Association, and it's a great organization because you've got physicians, you've got performers, you've got researchers, you've got teachers, you've got people coming at it from all sides, and you know, everybody's able to learn and grow from each other. And I will tell you that since I started teaching body mapping, my performing has gotten better, and my capacity to communicate complex concepts to my students has gotten better, because I don't rely on fuzzy images and weird analogies anymore when it comes to movement and technique. I save that for interpretation. But, you know, and when we get to breathing on Saturday morning, fans, we are going to have a fiesta of the great urban myths, all of those crazy things that we were told, or things that we might have even said, right? It's like, So, you know, I just teach the truth now. It's faster, it's easier, it's a lot less stress, and I get way, way, way better results. So, yeah. It's good. I've gone over time. I'm sorry, Max, but this was just too much fun.
That's okay. This is fantastic. We're so grateful for that first session. Thank you so much. We can give Dr. Buchanan a little bit of love there.
Thank you. Thank you.
Right.
I think some of my ACDA chapter students are going to come and join you.